Every now and then, there's a discovery that's so big and so amazing that it radically improves our understanding of some aspect of biology. Today, I'm very happy to tell you about a giant fossil discovery in Colorado, which provides an exquisite timeline of the following million years after the asteroid impact that wiped out the dinosaurs. This study is really cool and extremely interesting. I loved reading it, because we can see how fast the surviving lineages evolved and how quickly they adapted to their new ecologies. So first things first, let's start with a bit of background information. At the tail end of the age of dinosaurs, these thunder lizards were the dominant life forms on the planet. Mammals existed at the time, but they were relatively small, weighing only about 6 to 8 kilograms, and ecologically, they were generally confined to the underbrush and the forests, where they could hunt for insects and scavenge for food while hiding from the dinosaur predators that wanted to eat them for food. It was a humble, bleak existence for the mammals. But approximately 66 million years ago, an asteroid struck the Earth, impacting somewhere near the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. The impact event liquefied a region of the crust in the immediate vicinity, turning it to magma, and it threw up billions of tons of ash and dust into the atmosphere. In the geological blink of an eye, the Earth was transformed into a hellscape, and more than 75% of all species, including the vast majority of the dinosaurs, went extinct. The only dinosaur species to survive would become the crocodilians and the birds. Entire ecologies collapsed, as both animal communities and the physical environment itself was savaged and radically altered. Now, until this study, not much was known about the surviving ecology and how it regenerated immediately after the impact. Vertebrate fossils, for example, are particularly sparse, and those that have been discovered already are largely incomplete. The known fossil sites that correspond to this early period right after the impact are complicated, with discontinuous outcrops of fossils, with widely spaced localities, variable age controls, and some that just don't have that many fossils in the first place. All of these factors make these sites very difficult to study, and so our understanding of this period immediately after the impact has remained poor. Now, the study that I want to tell you about today analyzed fossils in the Corral Bluffs in the Denver Basin in Colorado. Compared to the other sites, this site is a gold mine. There's an outcrop that covers an almost continuous 1.1 million year-long span, with the first 100,000 years of represented material having been deposited before the asteroid impact. And this also means that there's almost a continuous collection of material that represents the first million years after the impact. Among this deposited fossilized material was 233 morphospecies of plants. The researchers noted that by 100,000 years after the impact, the number of dicot plant species had been reduced by more than half from their pre-impact numbers, and 46% of the pre-impact dicot species seem to have disappeared entirely from the post-impact strata. Curiously, they also noted that leaf surface area decreased significantly after the impact, suggesting, quote, a shift to faster growth strategies, unquote. The fossils suggest that it took about 300,000 years for the megaflora biodiversity to recover to its pre-impact levels. Before this time, the recovering forests were dominated by ferns, which are known to be early colonizers that rapidly refill a destroyed habitat after some kind of disaster, like a forest fire. Another interesting thing to note is that angiosperms, the flowering plants, really took off and rapidly diversified after the impact event. One specific discovery was the oldest sample of legumes, or bean plants, dated to more than 65 million years old. This means that the legumes emerged almost immediately after the impact, where they rapidly diversified and spread across both North and South America. The plant fossils also give clues as to the climate and the temperature, suggesting waves or pulses of warming. There was a warm interval immediately after the impact, lasting about 60,000 years. There was a second warming pulse of similar length that began around 300,000 years after the impact, and a shorter third warming pulse that occurred about 650 to 700,000 years after the impact. These warming events were important, as they had a strong influence on the contemporary flora and fauna. Now, perhaps most exciting, there were the fossilized remains of numerous vertebrate species, including crocodilians, lots of turtles. There was an abundance of fossilized turtle shells, and no less than 16 mammalian taxa. By using the size of the skulls and specific molar teeth to estimate the mammal's body mass, they were able to recreate a chronology of maximum body mass. Basically, they could track how large the largest mammal species evolved over time, and they could map this onto the larger picture of the recovering global ecology. The researchers reported that the largest bodied mammals disappeared after the impact event, which is not only what we would expect, it's what all of the other data suggests. Virtually anything larger than a small goat was killed, as all of these larger creatures would have been unable to burrow underground, or hide underwater, or otherwise protect themselves from the cataclysmic environmental forces unleashed by the asteroid impact. But within about 100,000 years, the surviving mammal species had recovered their pre-impact body mass, which was around 6 to 8 kilograms. Remember, these early mammals were small because they were living under the shadow of the dinosaurs. Except now, after the impact, these mammals were no longer pressured by a biodiverse community of dinosaurs that either competed with them or hunted them for food. Consider the time period around 300,000 years after the impact. The fossil evidence suggests that standing plant richness had recovered to pre-impact levels, and there was a warming pulse. So basically, the forests had largely recovered. There was vegetation in abundance, and the climate was much warmer than it had been for many tens of thousands of years. These dates also link up with the mammalian fossils, which show a sudden threefold increase in maximum mammalian body size to 20 kilograms or more. In addition, there was also a shift to a largely herbivorous diet, as opposed to the omnivorous and insectivorous diet of the smaller mammals that lived before and immediately after the impact. Seed fossils show a reduction in features used for air transport, suggesting, quote, a transition from wind to animal transport, unquote. So essentially, as these early mammals evolved to be larger and to eat a more herbivorous diet, they were engaging more with plants, with the vegetables. And so the seeds, the plant's seeds, evolved to be transported more often by animals than by the air, by the wind. The plants were basically responding to this selective pressure, where furry mammals were more common, and their seeds, either if the seeds were sticky or covered in hooks like Velcro, they could get stuck in the mammal's fur, and the mammal would travel some distance geographically, and the seeds could drop off. And so through this symbiosis with the mammals, the plants could spread out and increase their range and colonize more land. Additionally, around 700,000 years after the impact, the legume plants were becoming really common and widespread, and there was another shorter warming interval, and the maximum mammalian body size increased again, with large herbivorous species like the Taeniolabus tauensis reaching approximately 34 kilograms, and the Eoconodon coryphaeus reaching approximately 47 kilograms. Alright, now I'm going to read to you a very long passage from their paper, and it does a really wonderful job of summarizing everything and tying it all together, putting a bow on it. But before I start, just to avoid any confusion, I should clarify some of the vocab words that they're going to use. When the authors say post-KPGE, this means post-impact, or the time after the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction. They also refer to time periods called PU1, PU2, and PU3, and these are all references to the periods in between the warming pulses, or the periods that were started by a warming pulse. So PU1 begins basically immediately after the impact and lasts for about 300,000 years. PU2 then begins and lasts a little less than 400,000 years, and then here, PU3 begins about 700,000 years after the impact. Oh, and real quick, they use the term LMA, which means leaf mass per unit area. Or to put it another way, it's the quantity of vegetation per unit area. A higher LMA means that there's more vegetative growth. The forests are thicker and there's more standing richness in the vegetation, things like that. Alright, so now that we're done with the vocab words, let's get to it. The researchers say, quote, "The transition from an ecosystem characterized by a small-bodied mammalian fauna, post-disaster ferns, and low-diversity plant communities to one exhibiting a larger-bodied mammalian fauna and more ecologically and taxonomically complex forests mirrors modern post-disaster ecological successions, but on a much longer timescale, typically 10,000 to 100,000 years for recoveries from global mass extinctions versus 10 to 100 years for modern local regional ecological recoveries. The overall and long-term recovery that we observe has recently been described as an aspect of Earth system succession. This concept proposes that the global ecological succession following mass extinctions is intrinsically paced by the interactions of the biosphere and geosphere, both of which may be knocked out of equilibrium. The low-diversity, small-bodied mammalian fauna and low-diversity forests dominated by ferns and palms, often indicative of ecological disequilibrium, suggest that a period of ecosystem disequilibrium lasted for up to 100,000 years post-KPGE in our research area. A period of ecosystem recovery followed 100,000 to 300,000 years post-KPGE, when megafloral diversity steadily increased. At 300,000 years post-KPGE, we see several additional signs of ecosystem recovery, including 1. The increase and then plateau of megafloral standing richness, 2. LMA exceeding pre-KPGE levels, 3. Diversification of Juglandaceae, a potentially energy-rich food source for mammals, and 4. The first significant taxonomic diversification, dietary specialization, e.g. increased herbivory, and increase in maximum body mass of mammals. Finally, spatial niche partitioning, appearance of several additional large 30 kilogram plus mammals, and expansion of mammalian body mass disparity continues through 700,000 years at the PU2 and PU3 boundary, all further indications of ecosystem recovery. These changes are correlated with the arrival of plant taxa, e.g. legumes, that would have offered mammals new calorie-dense food sources. Taken together, our record places time estimates on the patterns of biotic recovery in Earth system succession and demonstrates that several aspects of ecosystem recovery occurred within 300,000 years post-KPGE." Unquote. So there you have it, an intensely detailed look at the first million years after the dinosaur-killing meteor impact 66 million years ago. This study was so fascinating because it touched on all of my favorite biological concepts: ecology, geochemistry, evolution, dinosaurs, and most profoundly, it is a perfect example of the ever-evolving tide of carbon. In this case, the replicating biochemical superstructures of primary interest are the plants, which adapted with faster growth forms before diversifying and radiating to recolonize a scoured planet, and the mammals, which adapted larger body sizes in the absence of dinosaur predators, and more herbivorous diets in the presence of abundant, calorie-dense vegetation. And this is all happening relatively briefly. It's all happening within 1 million years, which is just a tiny fraction of the total vertebrate evolutionary history. I think that there's another takeaway from this study that makes me feel pretty optimistic about the future of life on this planet. Right now, we're undergoing a man-made mass extinction, the anthropogenic mass extinction, and we're wiping out biodiversity at a tragic and alarming rate. But studies like this make me think that once we destroy our civilization, and the human species, if we survive, can no longer affect the world on such a scale, it really won't take too long for life to recover. Perhaps within 1 million years, life will recover from the human impact, and the world's biodiversity will regenerate to pre-human levels.